The headlines across Africa, but back home here in Ghana, the government is now commencing negotiations with Burkina Faso authorities on a new security framework aimed at fighting terrorism. Following that gruesome murder of at least 7 Ghanaian tomato traders in Burkina Faso's northern province of Titao a couple of days ago, Ghana's Foreign Minister, Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa, is now worried that the West Africa sub-region has become the epicenter for terrorism. The Ghanaian diplomat has already made engagements with neighboring country, Burkina Faso, where both governments have condemned the attacks on innocent civilians. The minister is now revealing negotiations are underway in a bid to create a security framework with the Burkina Faso government.
And we are saying today that Ghana and Burkina Faso will not be a dumping ground. We will not sit by as leaders for our young people to be destroyed because of illicit drugs. And we are going to enhance our cooperation to declare our countries a no-drug zone. And I must say that this has been a very, very substantive, meaningful, and impactful PJCC. We can report to our presidents, President Mahama, President Traore, that the assignment they gave us, we have delivered. We want to assure all of you that these agreements are not going to be decorative pieces. We have discussed strategies for immediate implementation, and we are going to make sure that they are implemented with all the force that we can muster, all the competence, and all the commitment that we can demonstrate. So you should all be assured that these are agreements that we are going to implement very, very successfully. Finally, in our deliberations, we also discussed the security situation. We condemned the latest violent extremist attack that took place in Titao, where a number of Ghanaians lost their lives, and also our fellow Burkina Faso. We have decided to deepen our security cooperation. We are currently negotiating a security framework which will help us to work together collectively to neutralize these violent extremists. We do not want our region to become the haven of these terrorists. We don't like the tag that this has become the epicenter of global terror. And we are determined as leaders to uproot this canker and to make sure that these violent extremists are neutralized. So we renew our condolences and commiserations to the families and loved ones of the recent attacks. And we want to thank the government of Burkina Faso for the rapid response in helping us to evacuate our injured and airlifting them back to Ghana, and how they also managed to contain the situation and bring matters under control. We were quite impressed with the responsive capacity of the Burkina Faso authorities. President Captain Ibrahim Traore met in January and in March of 2025 and tasked us as foreign ministers to reactivate our bilateral cooperation. And I am delighted to report today that we have not only complied with the directives from our 2 presidents, but we have made a lot of progress. Today, our deliberations have culminated in the signing of very important agreements. And I will list the agreements for you to respectfully convey.
Well, 8 agreements, we understand, all have been signed between the government of Ghana and the Burkina Faso authorities. A good time now to hear from Colonel Festus Aboagye, retired AU consultant on security, who's joining us via Zoom now. Thank you, sir, for your time. You're now hearing from the government of Ghana expressing appreciation to the Burkina Faso authorities, indicating just through the foreign minister there that the response has been, quote, impressive. Do you feel that the Burkina Faso authorities have indeed helped us in this situation? And Colonel, we're having difficulties hearing you. Probably you might want to unmute so we can hear the points you're sharing with us. But we've just seen the foreign minister there together with his counterpart, the Burkina Faso foreign minister. Your impression that, of course, the government of Ghana is, first of all, pleased at the level of containment from the Burkina Faso authorities. Impressive?
Well, I would say it is impressive, but that technically is the nature of the insurgency, whether in Mali or whether in Burkina Faso or Niger. The initiative of the time and the place to attack rests with the insurgents. And what the security forces of Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger have been doing is to respond. So the response that we're talking about here is a general tactic that the armed forces use. In other words, the insurgents did not aim, in the case of this Titao attack, to attack and hold the installation or hold territory. It's just to use the threat of terrorism to spread fear, kill, destroy, and in this case, get Ghanaians involved in the killing. But what I would say is that even if we are taking things for granted, this attack has brought home to us the need for us to tighten our bilateral relations with Burkina Faso as a first layer of regional security. That we can easily do because sub-region-wise, geopolitically, the sub-region is polarized. You have members of West Africa, or whatever is left of ECOWAS, who are moving heaven and earth, or heaven and hell, or whatever it is, to overthrow the military regimes in the AES countries. And they are doing this, allegedly, with the support of external powers. So any multilateral arrangement that brings ECOWAS together, as we speak, is going to be a bit difficult. And therefore, the best option left for Ghana is to pursue this bilateral arrangement. I am not too sure what is it in the agreements that the minister referred to, but he mentioned security, which I understand to mean physical security of the human beings and the goods and services and the economic activities that flow between our two states. He mentioned narcotics or drugs, which would border on transnational organized crime, for instance. So at least these two plus others will form part of the framework for the agreement. Now, it doesn't mean that the day after today, there's going to be security. Because we need to remember that Burkina Faso is in conflict. It is not a state like Ghana where we don't have any threats, physical threats, with the exception of maybe Boko and other inter-ethnic conflicts. Burkina Faso, for some time now, has arguably ceded control of its territory. I mean, 40 to 60% of Burkina Faso's territory is battled between Burkina Faso and the insurgents. And that happened to be one of the areas where the traders went deep into Burkina Faso. And maybe I'll use this opportunity to correct one misconception. People think that the attack happened on the borders of Ghana. I mean, right on the borders. That is never the case. Our traders travel deep into Burkina territory, about 300 to 350 kilometers north of our border, and just about 80 to 100 kilometers from the Malian border. That was a classic conflict zone. But why did they go there? Because we have a structural deficit in terms of food security or agricultural policy, that over the years, we have not been able to invest in the staples that we eat before we even talk about the cash crops. So because Burkina Faso, no matter what people say about this Captain Traore, has added 1 or 2 tomato factories.
In fact, I was just about going there. We're being criticized now as a country for being too close to the military regime in Burkina Faso. Do you feel that President John Dramani Mahama ought to revise his strategy towards the AES?
Well, I believe he is doing that. But I see the malaise has been too long and too deep. Look, let me digress a bit. Burkina Faso has an airline. At least it has acquired, bought, purchased outright 1 aircraft. Burkina Faso, the last 1, 2, or 3 weeks ago, has bought 2 attack helicopters. We are here talking about buying or depositing monies for this or that. In terms of agricultural policy, over the years, we have been depending on these conflict countries. 84% of the tomatoes that we consume in this country is documented as coming from Burkina Faso. And because Traore has now established the policy of feeding the tomato grown locally in Burkina Faso into the tomato processing factories, these women could not easily access or find tomatoes around Ouagadougou, around Bobo Dioulasso, and therefore were constrained to travel deep into the conflict zone. It's a structural policy failure on our part that we should be depending on a country in conflict. And this morning I heard, I think on your channel or some other channel, that there's a shortage of tomatoes because the women are now afraid. They are no longer going. By the way, we also depend on Niger for the onions that we eat. So if we don't take immediate steps, besides and aside from and beyond the security arrangement to ensure that we have full security, this will not be the last incident that we're going to have. Before we even talk about a direct attack of the insurgents on the country.
The foreign minister, I was just going to say that the foreign minister of the Republic of Ghana is now worried that we've become the epicenter, in West Africa, of terrorism. Now we're going to, of course, do a bilateral engagement with Burkina Faso on that, sharing intelligence and the others. But will that really tackle the challenge of terrorism within the SAP region? And is our approach the best way out of this?
Well, that was what I alluded to. Remember in 2017, the Nana Akufo-Addo government established the Accra Initiative. Now, I have something to say about the Accra Initiative. The Accra Initiative should have been embedded in ECOWAS. It should have been sitting in Abuja. That initiative was an Accra, Ghana initiative. Indeed, there are anecdotes that it was an idea that was pushed by the Americans. And of course, we recall that our president went to Washington and, as people would say, snitched on Burkina Faso. So even if we had the Accra Initiative, it might not have had the full involvement or engagement of countries like Burkina Faso or Mali, or if you like, Niger. Now, given the polarization that I refer to, which is ongoing as we speak, some ECOWAS member states are actively planning to overthrow the military regimes in these 3 AES countries. And therefore, we are not going to be able to have even the ECOWAS minus AES. Of course, Ghana in 2023, you remember ECOWAS came to Accra and we saber rattled that we're going to go to Niger and overthrow General Tiani's military regime. So because of the differences in security perspectives or geopolitical positions of the ECOWAS countries, any talk of a multilateral ECOWAS, that is ECOWAS minus the AES, is something in the distant future. Before we even talk about collaboration between ECOWAS and the AES countries. So the best option that is left for us is this one that we are pursuing because we have a contiguous border with Burkina Faso. And therefore, there is nothing wrong. Indeed, there is everything to say that it is a strategic move that we deepen our security, intelligence, all manner of cooperation with Burkina Faso.
Yeah, opinions
And
are now
it's such
divided.
that
Yeah, opinions are now divided on that specific aspect. The fact that Burkina Faso itself is still grappling with the issue of terrorism. Some say that let's rather focus on territorial integrity, how porous our borders are. There are reports indicating that, of course, you can point to, for instance, what the West Africa Center for Counter-Extremism did, pointing out that our northern frontier is not as, strong as we would expect it to be. What do we do in terms of, securing our frontiers?
You see, focusing on territorial integrity does not mean that you do not need your partners, at least those that you share common borders with, to help deepen that security. Because the threat is echoing off the border with Burkina Faso. And therefore, even if you deploy all the Ghana armed forces on the northern border, and you do not deepen cooperation with Burkina Faso, you are not going to achieve as much security as would be necessary. Secondly, the reality of security dynamics in this region is that the entire ECOWAS, West Africa, AES countries have been reactive. We have sat down and waited until the threats have materialized before we put in place mechanisms. And that is where we find ourselves. Since 2012, and since 2012 from Mali, 2015-17 from Burkina Faso and Niger, we've been talking about retooling, which of course the governments are doing. But you and I know that the investments that we are making or putting into that security, one, is too small and it's too slow. So we have established 3 mechanized battalions. We have established FOBs, both naval and air and army. But the state of readiness, mission readiness of these FOBs are not up to scratch until maybe one day, God forbid, the terrorists now attack, and then we'll go and find the money to buy the equipment and so on. So I don't want to challenge my good friend Mukhtar Mutaru that we are not investing in, we are not investing at all. We are investing. You see, we are investing both in human equipment and technological resources, including, of course, our partner that I don't like, the United States, which is also helping us with some, technological intelligence sources and so on and so forth. But we need to do more. The idea being that, as I said, the terrorists will decide when to attack and where to attack. So the freedom that we have right now is to ensure that we strengthen our defenses. As we speak, the helicopters have not arrived. Not to talk about the transport aircraft. We can use that for strategic lift territorially, but we need the helicopters. And indeed, at this current moment, every country, military forces need drones, as well as counter-drone measures.
Right.
We don't have them.
I see.
But a terrorist can fly a drone from anywhere in Accra, Kumasi, and hit any target that they want. I don't think, as a country, we have acquired what in military terms we call anti-access and anti-denial. These are electronic devices that you use to jam, to spoof, drones. We don't have them, let alone the drones themselves going on the offensive to attack the terrorist.
Anyway, it's quite a long day ahead of us, and yes, you would say, in acquiring that, but grateful for spending some time with us here on the program. Colonel Festus Aboji, retired, joining us with his perspectives on developments in the Sahel. You're watching Connect Africa here on the JoyNews channel. Still ahead, we'll talk about how West Africa is increasingly becoming a hub for drug trafficking. All that and more coming up shortly. We'll be back. And now, West Africa is increasingly becoming the hub of drug trafficking. Well, that's according to the sub-regional body ECOWAS, which has begun engagements with chiefs of naval staffs from its member states to deal with the issue of drug trafficking and also some other growing maritime issues in the Gulf of Guinea. Now, I caught up with Abdel Fattah Musa, ECOWAS Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, who shed light on the engagements with the naval chiefs of staff while touching on some other issues of terror attacks in the Burkina Faso northern province of Tita.
You know, ECOWAS has been progressively operationalizing its security architecture. And we've got the defense aspect of it. This is actually the architecture that is supposed to protect our maritime domain, our water bodies, the Gulf of Guinea, and some of the lakes and rivers in our region, right? So this is a meeting of the subcommittee of the chiefs of naval staff in the region. And there are a whole lot of developments as far as our the protection of our maritime domain is concerned. We've set up the regional maritime architecture, which is made up of about 3 international coordination centers, one in Cotonou, one here in Accra, another one in Praia, and the regional coordination center in Abidjan. They are supposed to be the centers for monitoring our maritime domain, and it is still under operationalization. So this meeting is going to discuss how to strengthen, that architecture in the region. And then 2, how do we really see maritime security in our region? Because West Africa is made up of the Sahel and the coastal countries, right? And the Sahelian countries are bona fide members of our maritime architecture. With the situation in the region now, how do we enhance collaboration with our neighbors in the Sahel in order to join them? Because their import-export trade goes through our ports of entry. They are landlocked. Drug trafficking affects both sides. How do we deal with it? So the meeting is looking at that collaboration, in the region, despite the fact that the AES countries have decided to go on their way. We are geographically bound together. So we are working, on that, which is also a very important thing. And then the final thing that I would want to mention with regard to this meeting is really when we talk about maritime security, what is the content of it? People talk about piracy. Piracy has gone down year on year for the past 3-4 years in our region, which is good. But which West African country is a maritime power? No, we don't deal with that. Drug trafficking, yes, goes through the Gulf of Guinea also, and that is important also to deal with. But for the teeming young people in our region, there are other issues that are of vital importance. One of them is the illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, which is depriving our youth in the coastal areas and others of their livelihood. So how do we make sure that through collective bargaining we are able to preserve our blue economy, in the region in order to safeguard the present and the future generation? And then linked to that, it is the dumping of toxic waste in our water masses. We are not talking about only the Gulf of Guinea, but our river masses, whether it's the Volta River, the Oti River in Ghana, whether it is Senegal River or Niger River, which is about the longest in our region. How do we protect these assets.
When you were speaking, you touched on how the Gulf of Guinea is becoming a hub or a transit route for illicit drugs.
Yes.
How bad is the situation, and how do you intend to tackle that?
Yeah, the situation, it's not good at all. Over the last 2 years, tons of drugs, some coming, even landing in our airports. There was a case like that in Guinea-Bissau. Drugs landing there, being transshipped through the Sahel into Europe and then to to the Americas again. They are coming from Latin America through West Africa back into Europe and America. But because today there have been greater security in the US, in Europe and other places, unfortunately for our region, much of the drug that usually goes to Europe, much of it remains in the region. And so, instead of being a transshipment zone, our young people are becoming consumers. So it's a consumer society. And this is one of the biggest threats to our future generation in the region. So fighting drug trafficking is very important. And we know that the Gulf of Guinea is one of the main transit routes for drug trafficking in our region. So, yeah.
I want us to touch on this final issue before we let you go. Just yesterday we heard of the unfortunate news that some Ghanaians were attacked when they were trying to trade in the neighboring Burkina Faso. Titals, to be precise. Have you taken notice of this development, and do you share in the outburst of condemnation against these extremist attacks?
Exactly. It is the challenges of regional integration. Really, and it brings to sharp relief, the whole issue of terrorism and violent extremism in our region. As you know, the epicenter of terrorism is in the Sahel. Unfortunately for now, we and the three of the main centers of terrorism, Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, we do not have formal relations as ECOWAS and them, even though we have left the door open for collaboration on security. So far, Ghana has been escaped the worst of it. We've had numerous terrorist attacks in the north of Benin, in the zone they call W Park and others. In northern Togo, there have been attacks. Côte d'Ivoire actually started the southward attacks of terrorism from the north. That is the Jenim forces in particular, who are very active in the southern zones of the Sahel region, into Côte d'Ivoire. The attacks in the coastal countries began in the Grand Bassam area. But Côte d'Ivoire so far has managed to sort of contain it, right? So they are now suffering from inflow of refugees across the border, escaping terrorist attacks in the north. Ghana has also so far escaped direct attack on its northern territory. But we have suffered from refugee flows. And you know that among these refugees crossing the border is also the possibility of sleeper cells, coming into the country. Ghana is saved one way, linguistically. Linguistically, Ghana is Anglophone. So it is not very easy for terrorists from the Sahel to embed, themselves in the region. But the attacks on the truckers, on the tomato traders and other brings into sharp relief the need, for collaboration between the Sahel and the South. Because the two regions still enjoy free movement of people, free trade and others. But once we don't collectively, fight terrorism, then unfortunately there will be such victims.
So what do you intend to do in this specific case, to work with the government?
No, in this specific case, of course, we are calling for full investigation into the matter, and then to find out about what are the corrective measures that can be taken. Unfortunately, ECOWAS does not have formal relations with the countries either in Burkina Faso or anywhere like that, but there are bilateral relations. Ghana maintains very cordial relations with the countries of the Sahel, and it is very unfortunate that Ghanaian citizens have become victims of this terrorism. So once again, the appeal, to our neighbors to the north of our region is that, listen, we can have our political differences, but security does not pick and choose. We cannot live, geographically, we are bound together. There is nobody who can live outside the zone. We are, forced by geography, by nature, by relations to be together.
Is this enough grounding for them to come back to the fold?
No, that is the wish of ECOWAS, and we are looking forward, to the time when they will come. Unfortunately, the thing is that since the breakaway of our neighbors from the north, given terrorism, insecurity as one of the causes, we have not seen a significant drop in terrorist attacks in those regions. And so, once again, that reinforces the message that we may not immediately come together, but on matters of security, we need to collaborate, because all of us are victims of what is happening. And if we maintain our political differences and then extend those differences to the security domain, both of us will be losers. So there is the need for us to have that. As for coming together, that is the sovereign decision of the Alliance of Sahel States. It is the wish of ECOWAS that come a few years, we are going to become another 15 member state. We are very happy in this regard that Guinea, which also was living under a military regime, has already transited and restored democratic order, constitutional order, and they are back in the fold fully of ECOWAS. And this is what we are all looking forward to. That our differences are smaller compared to what binds us together, whether it is blood relations, whether it is neighborliness, among them, whether it is our interconnectedness in trade, in movement, intermarriages, and other things across the region. We have too much in common to constantly live apart. So it is our hope that sooner or later we are going to be one community again.
And finally, is there any message to coastal West Africa in terms of consolidating our security and working more closely?
Yes, it is very important. Our message is that we should avoid proliferation of initiatives in the region. There is the ECOWAS integrated maritime strategy, under which we are developing the maritime architecture. The thing is, our member states must understand that the maritime domain, it is at the core of our livelihood, and that they should really put their money where their mouth is. There have been a lot of promises that they are going to contribute to protect the maritime domain, but not enough resources is going into it. And ECOWAS itself is overstretched. So what I would say, my appeal to our member states is that, listen, the Gulf of Guinea, it is the other half of the security threat facing West Africa. We've got the Sahel, with whatever is happening, the terrorism. In the Gulf of Guinea, it is dumping of toxic waste. It is overfishing of our water resources. It is drug trafficking. It is human trafficking, which, takes place along the Gulf of Guinea. So if they really want to develop the blue economy in our region, that is the resources that we can capitalize on and add value to our prosperity in the region, much of it is going to be the Gulf of Guinea. Whether through trade, whether through its own resources, oil, resources, hydrocarbons are very much over there. And if you don't fight oil bunkering, you don't fight piracy, then it is very difficult to protect the hydrocarbon reserves that we have, our fish stock, and then others. Also the marine fauna, and all that is very, very important for the economies of our country and for employment and for adding value, the value chain in our region. And Ghana itself, for example, is the host of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. The blue economy is a major part of it. And so for me, we must pay as much attention to the Gulf of Guinea as we pay to internal issues in the region. It is very, very, very critical for our own survival, in the future, because people are predicting. The prediction is that tomorrow's wars will not be terrorism. It will not be violent extremism. It will be water wars. And we need to protect our water domains, whether it is the River Volta, whether it is the River Niger, whether it's the River Senegal or the Gulf of Guinea or Lake Chad. We need to protect them, and I think we need to pay a lot more attention, to it. And finally, I want to link even terrorism and violent extremism to our water bodies, because Boko Haram and its affiliates, they operate around Lake Chad, the Lake Chad basin. Why? Because Lake Chad has lost over 90% of its water body. And so the ecosystem has been destroyed. So the young people will become something like foot soldiers to terrorism. The same thing, we have in the Sahel. There is a lot of ground water reserves, but nobody is mining this water in order to make the Sahel green again, which is a major force multiplier when it comes to integration, when it comes to economic growth and others. And then we have Futajalo Mountains, almost all our rivers, River Volta, River Senegal, River Niger in particular, they all take their sources from there. That is a major resource. But the Futajalo Mountains is also under environmental threat. So you see that wherever you see conflict, it is gradually become, occurring around water bodies. So we have to pay a lot of attention to our water resources in the region, given the linkages between transnational organized crime and, the challenges to our maritime domain and, also our water bodies in the region.
Ambassador, thank you so much for talking. You might want to watch a playback of that on all of our socials. It's at JoyNews on TV. Let's wrap up with this, because the Pan-African Tourism Board is making yet another case for African countries to make the African Union's vision of a borderless continent a reality. The board, which has the mandate from the Continental Body A to promote tourism across the whole of the continent, says visa openness remains a major hurdle to the free movement of people across Africa. Despite progress, the latest Africa Visa Open Index released by the African Development Bank reveals that 51% of the travelers across the continent still require visas. Now, in an interview with JoyNews, President of the board, Mariam Lesian, has been stressing the need for a borderless Africa.
I have two elements in that angle. We have two big challenges. One is infrastructure in Africa. They really have to work on that. Another one is the visas. It's really pity when you see African countries or African people, they struggle to go to another African country. But people coming from outside the continent, it's visa upon arrival, no referral visas. It's easy for them. They pay on arrival and they get in. But for a fellow African, it's really a nightmare. So we really want our leaders to work into that angle, because this is our continent. It's one. We're one. It's only the borders. But me, I don't count on the borders. I think Africans, based on our culture and where we come from, we're one. We shouldn't have those restrictions of visas. We must put measures, yes, but not those restrictions like referral visas for other countries.
The protocol on free movement of people and goods and services, it's not coming to force because more African countries have not ratified that. Are you making that passionate call to our leaders to consider that protocol? At least that will ease the issue of visas too.
Yes, actually we have been pushing with African leaders, and as we can see, like a lot of countries now, one after another, they release the ban of visas. Like Rwanda, they've done it, and South Africa, they're on the process. It's going to be a free visa for all the Africans. And I think eventually all the countries will take that direction, and we're pushing so that it can be very soon. I can give an example, like a Nigerian to come to Tanzania, it's a nightmare because of a lot of other factors, security and everything. But different bodies have really pushed, and very soon it's going to be lifted. So the leaders are listening to the voices which are telling them, these are Africans, these are our brothers and sisters. We have to make sure that they move freely. And regarding the commodities, moving commodities from one angle to another, I think the infrastructure is a challenge. Flights, it's expensive, very expensive to move from one country to another. Taking a cargo to Europe, to New York, or to anywhere in outside Africa, it's cheaper. But taking the same cargo from Kenya to Rwanda, or from Kenya, which is nearby, you can find it's 2 times the price. So the leaders are really working hard on that. They're really working hard, and we have strong airlines in Africa, like talking of Ethiopian Airlines. They're really trying to see how they can add the routes and reduce the rates. As I know, there was a time coming to Ethiopia from Tanzania, it was $1,500 to $1,800, but now it went down to $600. That's a very great achievement, and I think we're moving to the right direction to solve the challenges which we have.
Yeah, and we're beginning to see that, for instance, between Ghana and Zambia, there's an agreement for a visa waiver for these 2 countries. Is that what you are expecting from more African countries?
Yes, and as I said before, it's starting from one country to another. Eventually, you'll find the southern region, the SADC, they've decided, all the SADC countries. Then you'll find the East African community, they've decided for all the East African community. The ECOWAS will do the same. Then when they do that, then one day they'll say, why only SADC? Why only ECOWAS? Why only East African community? Why don't we do it together? So I think eventually it will come to that time. And it's not going to take time. Very soon we're going to see Africans, we can move around, we can travel and do our businesses from one country to another. And so that our countries can increase the economy and the trading can contribute to the GDP of the country's economy. Yes.
And speaking Miriam Lesian there making a case for a borderless Africa. That's all time will allow us here on Connect Africa, and bless us again. We'll see you again. Until then, log on to myjoyonline.com. More stories for you to catch up on. Thanks for watching. Bye.